In 1963, a woman named Mei Lan Wang woke up at 4 in the morning in a 3-room apartment above a laundry on Sacramento Street in San Francisco. She had a pot of leftover rice, a handful of dried anchovies, and a piece of salted fish wrapped in newspaper that her neighbor had knocked on her door to give her. She fed 6 people with that. That meal is number 14 on this list. Hi, my name is Jason, and this is Lost Asian Foods. Number 25. Jook, Cantonese rice porridge. Every culture has a version of this. Nobody does it like a Cantonese grandmother in a Chinatown apartment with a clay pot stained the color of mahogany from 20 years of use. Plain white rice, water, and thyme. That is the base. A piece of century egg if you had one. A few slivers of ginger. A drizzle of soy sauce and sesame oil at the end. The rice breaks down completely after an hour of simmering. It stops being rice and becomes something else entirely. Something that coats the stomach and slows the world down. In the Chinatowns of San Francisco and New York in the 1950s and 60s, jook was what you ate when you were sick, when you were poor, when the week had been long and the body had nothing left. It cost almost nothing. A cup of rice and the water. But the way it was made, slowly and patiently, with a pot that had cooked 1,000 portions before yours, that was the whole recipe. Nobody puts jook on a menu anymore and calls it the main event. They dress it up with crab and ginger and charge $18 for a bowl. Oh, and call it congee. Your grandmother called it dinner. Number 24. Steamed egg with soy sauce. Jing. 3 eggs are beaten with warm water until completely smooth, poured into a ceramic bowl covered with a plate and set over a wok of gently simmering water for 12 minutes. Not boiling. Never boiling. Because boiling made it rubbery. And your grandmother knew the difference between a simmer and a boil, the way she knew everything else. By feel, by sound, by years of standing at that stove. What came out was a custard so silky it trembled when you set it on the table. A few drops of soy sauce across the surface. A drizzle of sesame oil. Sometimes a scattering of green onion, if there was one on the counter. 3 eggs stretched across 4 bowls of rice, because that was the math of survival cooking in Chinatown households, from San Francisco to New York through the 1960s and 70s. Meat was too expensive, the children needed something warm, and nobody had time to consult a recipe they did not own anyway. The whole technical skill of this dish lived in the distinction between a simmer and a boil. It was a distinction your grandmother felt without thinking, one she never explained because she assumed everyone already knew. That distinction is now almost completely gone because nobody is standing next to her at the stove anymore. Number 23. Salted fish with pork belly. Xian Yu Jing Ru. A slab of salted fish, the kind that came wrapped in paper from the dried goods shop on the corner, laid over a layer of thinly sliced pork belly in a shallow dish, steamed over rice so that the fat from the pork and the brine from the fish dripped down into the grains below. That rice at the bottom of the pot was the prize. Every child in every Chinatown apartment knew to scrape the bottom of the rice cooker when this dish was served. The salted fish cost almost nothing because it had already been preserved, already been transported cheaply, already been sitting in a barrel at the back of the grocery for weeks. It was not glamorous. In fact, the smell of salted fish cooking was the reason Chinatown apartments kept their windows closed, and their neighbors complained anyway. But that smell meant dinner was coming, and dinner was going to be good. Number 22. Braised peanuts with star anise. Lo Hua Sheng. A pot of raw peanuts simmered for 2 hours in water with star anise, soy sauce, a piece of cinnamon bark, and a few dried chilies until the peanuts went in hard and came out soft, dark, fragrant, and completely impossible to stop eating. This was not a snack in the way we think of snacks now. This was not something you ate from a bag while watching television. This was a dish that appeared at the table alongside rice and vegetables, something to pick at slowly, to give the hands something to do while the conversation ran long and the tea kept getting refilled. In the herbalist shops and small groceries of New York Chinatown in the 1970s, bags of braised peanuts sat on the counter next to the register in open containers. Old men bought them by the scoop and took them outside to eat on folding chairs on the sidewalk. They paid maybe 50 cents for enough to last an afternoon. Think about that for 1 second, because today the same peanuts served in a ceramic ramekin at a dim sum restaurant in Manhattan cost $9 and arrive with a small card on the table explaining their provenance, the spice profile, and the heritage of the recipe. Your great-uncle, who bought his from a plastic bag and sat on a folding chair on Mott Street in the sun and ate them with his fingers, enjoyed them considerably more than anyone who has ever received a card explaining what they are about to eat. Number 21. Water spinach with fermented tofu. Tung choy with nam yu. Water spinach, also called morning glory, is stir-fried in a wok over the highest heat your burner can produce. Garlic and a cube of fermented red tofu are dissolved into the oil before anything else goes in. Fermented tofu is the ingredient that divided families and divided generations, and separated people who grew up eating Chinese food from people who only thought they had. Either you understood fermented red tofu, or you did not. Either your nose recognized that smell from the jar as something deeply familiar and right, or it sent you backing out of the kitchen. There was no middle position, no acquiring the taste gradually. You knew immediately which side you were on. If you were on the right side, if your grandmother had been putting that cube of funky, ancient, aggressively fragrant tofu into her wok since before you were born, then combined with the crisp, slightly hollow stems of the water spinach and the smoke of a screaming hot wok that left char marks on the leaves and made the whole dish taste like it had been kissed by fire, this was one of the great simple dishes of Chinese home cooking. It cost almost nothing. It took under 10 minutes. No restaurant ever fully replicated it, because no restaurant was ever willing to turn the heat up high enough or trust the fermented tofu enough to let it do what it does. In the Chinatown restaurants of San Francisco and New York, this dish never appeared on any menu because it was the staff meal. It was eaten crouched on overturned milk crates in the alley between the lunch rush and the dinner service. The customers inside got the shrimp and the lobster and the whole roasted duck. The people who cooked all of those things ate this. That fact alone tells you everything you will ever need to know about who actually understood food and who was simply paying for the performance of it. Number 20. Red bean soup, Hongdu Tang. Here is something the dessert menus of modern Chinese restaurants got completely wrong. Red bean soup was never supposed to be thick. It was not supposed to be a paste or a pudding. It was a thin, gently sweet broth with whole soft beans floating in it, served warm in a small bowl at the end of a meal. Dried red beans simmered with dried tangerine peel and rock sugar for 90 minutes until the beans were tender, but still whole. That was the recipe. The tangerine peel is the part everyone forgets. Without it, you have sweet beans. With it, you have something that tastes like a grandmother's kitchen in Guangdong. In Chinatown herbal shops throughout the 1960s and 70s, red bean soup was sold by the cup for a few cents. It was considered medicinal, good for the blood, good for the skin. Your grandmother did not call it dessert. She called it necessary. Number 19. Steamed spare ribs with black bean sauce, douqi zheng pai gu. Small pieces of pork spare rib, chopped through the bone, marinated in fermented black beans, garlic, soy sauce, oyster sauce, and a little cornstarch, then placed in a shallow dish and steamed for 25 minutes. This is one of the foundational dishes of Cantonese home cooking and dim sum culture. But the home version and the restaurant version are entirely different experiences. The restaurant version arrives in a bamboo steamer on a cart. The home version came out of a wok covered with a plate in a Chinatown apartment where the steam fogged the single window that faced the alley. The home version had more garlic. It always did. The fermented black beans in the home version were roughly chopped, and some of them were left whole, so they burst between your teeth. That texture is something no restaurant has ever successfully replicated. They make it prettier. They make it more consistent. They lost the whole point. Number 18. Winter melon soup. Dong Gua Tang. A block of winter melon bought at a Chinatown vegetable stall for almost nothing, cut into large chunks, simmered in a pork bone broth with dried shrimp and ginger until the melon turned translucent and soft. The broth was clear and the flavor was gentle. The winter melon absorbed the pork and shrimp and gave back something clean and cooling in return. In the tenement kitchens of San Francisco and Los Angeles Chinatowns through the 1960s, winter melon soup was the dish that stretched a single pork bone across 3 days of eating. Day 1, you had the broth with the bone. Day 2, the melon went in. Day 3, you added whatever vegetables were left in the crisper. The pot kept feeding. That is the architecture of Chinese survival cooking. Nothing stops until the pot is empty, and even then you start the next pot with what you have left. Number 17. Stir-fried bitter melon with eggs. Kugua chao dan. Bitter melon, sliced thin, salted and left to rest in a colander for 20 minutes to draw out some of the bitterness. Then rinsed and stir-fried with beaten egg in a hot wok with a little oil and soy sauce. The bitterness never fully went away after all of that. It was still there at the back of your throat when you swallowed. But that was never the point. The point was never to eliminate the difficulty. The point was to learn how to eat something difficult and find the good in it anyway, to sit with the bitterness long enough to discover that underneath it was something green and alive and worth the effort. In Chinatown, households from the 1950s through the 1980s, bitter melon was the vegetable that separated the people who genuinely grew up inside Chinese cooking from the people who were merely visiting it from the outside. If you ate bitter melon as a child, if your grandmother put it on the table and expected you to finish your bowl, and you came back to it as an adult, something in you remembered before your brain had a chance to object. Your body knew it first. Today, most American-born children of Chinese immigrants have never once tasted it because it was the first thing quietly dropped from the dinner table when parents decided their children deserved easier food and fewer questions from classmates and a smoother passage through a country that already made everything hard enough. That dropping was an act of love. It genuinely was. It was also the beginning of a loss no one fully understood until the dinner table was already different and the melon was already gone. Number 16. Dry-fried green beans. Gan bien si ji du. Green beans blistered in a dry wok over maximum heat until their skin wrinkled and charred in spots, then tossed with ground pork, dried shrimp, Sichuan preserved vegetable, garlic, and a splash of soy sauce. The wok had to be screaming hot. If the wok was not hot enough, you got steamed beans. Nobody wanted steamed beans. The dry frying took about 10 minutes and produced something that tasted like it had been cooking for an hour. This dish appeared in the Sichuan and Hunan immigrant communities that settled in New York and San Francisco from the 1970s onward. It was never a restaurant showpiece. It was the dish the cook made for the other cooks. The staff meal. The true measure of a kitchen. Any restaurant kitchen that made this well for the people who worked in it was a kitchen worth trusting. Number 15. Salted duck eggs with congee. not the store-bought ones in the red wax shells. The real ones. Raw duck eggs packed in a mixture of clay, ash, salt, and rice wine and left to cure for a month in a clay pot on a shelf in the back of the kitchen. The yolk turned a deep, oily orange. The white turned firm and bracingly salty. One salted egg cracked over a bowl of plain jook was a complete meal. It cost almost nothing and lasted weeks without refrigeration. In the herbal shops and preserved food stores of Chinatown in the 1950s, you could buy single salted eggs from a barrel for a few cents each. Your grandmother bought 3 at a time and made them last a week. She knew exactly how to stretch a salted egg across 4 bowls of congee without anyone feeling shortchanged. That is a skill. That specific skill of making a little feel like enough is the skill these kitchens were built on. Number 14. Preserved vegetable and pork rice. Miai kai ku rao fan. Fatty pork belly braised until tender with mei kai. The dark, deeply funky Hakka preserved mustard greens that smelled like a basement and tasted like the earth had been concentrating flavor for 6 months specifically for this purpose. The pork and the preserved vegetable were inseparable. Neither one worked without the other. The pork needed the sharp salt of the vegetable to cut through its fat. The vegetable needed the fat of the pork to soften its aggression. Together, they went over rice, and the rice did the rest. In the Hakka communities of San Francisco's Chinatown through the 1960s and 70s, Meikai Kuru was the dish that told you which family was home by the smell alone. You could identify a Hakka kitchen from halfway down the hall. The smell was not subtle. The flavor was not subtle. Nothing about this dish apologized for itself, and that was exactly right. Number 13. Tofu with century egg and ginger. Pi dan dao fu. Silken tofu, the soft kind that trembles when you set down the plate, topped with a chopped century egg, a drizzle of soy sauce and sesame oil, and a shower of minced ginger and green onion. No cooking required. The whole dish came together in under 3 minutes. It was the dish you made when there was nothing else to make, and the family needed to eat in 10 minutes. The century egg was the ingredient that scared everyone outside the culture and sustained everyone inside it. The preserved black and gray interior, the sharp mineral flavor, the way it contrasted against the cool, neutral tofu. That contrast was the whole point. This is one of the great no-cook dishes in Chinese home cooking, and it has almost entirely vanished from home kitchens because the century egg has been successfully branded as terrifying. It is not terrifying. It is extraordinary. And whoever convinced your generation it was disgusting did them a disservice. Number 12. Braised tofu with minced pork. Hongxiao dao fu. Firm tofu was cut into rectangles, pan-fried until golden on both sides, then braised in a sauce of soy sauce, oyster sauce, a little sugar, garlic, and water, with a handful of minced pork stirred in. The tofu absorbed the sauce, and the pork gave it weight. This was a 45-minute meal that tasted like it had been cooking since morning. In the working-class Chinatown households of the 1950s and 60s, tofu was the protein when meat was too expensive. A block of fresh tofu from the tofu shop on the corner cost about 10 cents. The tofu shops opened before dawn. They delivered to restaurants and sold to families out the back door. Every Chinatown had one. Almost none of them are left. When the tofu shop closed, something about the neighborhood changed in a way that was hard to name and impossible to fix. Number 11. Steamed chicken with ginger and scallion by Chie. A whole chicken poached in barely simmering water for 40 minutes, then plunged into an ice bath to stop the cooking and tighten the skin. Sliced and served at room temperature with a sauce made from nothing more than minced ginger, scallion, salt, and hot oil poured over the top, so the raw ingredients bloomed in the heat. That sauce is one of the great condiments of Chinese cooking, and almost nobody outside a Cantonese household knows it exists. The chicken was pale, the skin was silky, and the meat near the bone was still slightly pink the way it was supposed to be. American food culture was not ready for that. It still is not. Chinatown cooks made this for family meals, for new mothers recovering from childbirth, and for anyone the community was trying to tell we are taking care of you without using those words. The chicken said it instead. Number 10. Hakka salt-baked chicken, yunjuji. A whole chicken rubbed inside and out with a paste of salt, ginger, and 5 spice powder, wrapped in parchment paper and buried in a wok of coarse heated salt, covered with a lid, and left to cook in the dry heat of the salt for 45 minutes. The chicken emerged from the salt with a paper skin that crackled when you tore it, and a meat so tender and fragrant that people who had never tasted it could not believe the ingredient list. Salt, ginger, 5 spice, a chicken. That was your entire recipe. The Hakka people brought this to the Chinatowns of America and made it on special occasions and on the days when someone needed to be reminded that simple things done with complete attention were better than complicated things done carelessly. That lesson is available in every bite. Number 9. Turnip cake, lobak go. Grated white radish mixed with rice flour, dried shrimp, Chinese sausage, and dried mushrooms, poured into a rectangular pan, steamed until set, then sliced and pan-fried until the outside was crispy and the inside was soft and giving. This was the dish your grandmother made on New Year's Eve and then again on every other morning because there was always leftover pan. The turnip cake from dim sum carts was never as good as the one made at home. I know that is a controversial statement. I stand by it. The ones on the carts had been sitting. Your grandmother's came straight from the pan to the plate. The edges were still sizzling. You burned your mouth and you did not care. In the 1970s, this was made in every Cantonese household in America that had a steamer and a rectangular pan. Today, most people under 40 have only eaten it from a cart. Number 8. Soy sauce chicken, si yao gai. A whole chicken braised in a master sauce of soy sauce, dark soy, rock sugar, Shaoxing wine, star anise, ginger, and water. The sauce was never thrown away. It was strained and refrigerated, and the next chicken went into the same pot with the same sauce, and the sauce deepened over months of use. Some families had master sauces that were decades old. The chicken came out dark, lacquered, and sweet with a depth that a new sauce made fresh could not touch. In the roast meat shops of Chinatown that hung their ducks and chickens in the window, soy sauce chicken was the everyday item, the accessible one. You could buy a whole soy sauce chicken for about $3 in 1975. Take it home, chop it over rice, feed 4 people. That $3 chicken may be the single greatest value meal this country has ever produced. Number 7. Plain congee with youtiao, baijiu with Chinese fried dough. The most humble meal on this list, and somehow the one I feel most strongly about. Plain white congee with absolutely nothing in it except a piece of youtiao, the long fried dough stick, pushed down into the porridge so it softened at one end and stayed crispy at the other. That combination of textures, soft rice porridge and crunchy, then soft fried dough, is a breakfast that has sustained people in southern China for centuries and sustained their descendants in Chinatown for generations more. Youtiao were made before dawn in the back of Chinatown bakeries. They came out of the oil in pairs, twisted together because the dough was shaped that way deliberately. They cost almost nothing. A pair cost maybe 15 cents in 1968. The bakeries that made them fresh every morning are almost all gone. The frozen ones from the Asian supermarket are not the same. They are not even close. Number 6. Sand ginger chicken, shajiangji. Poached chicken, sliced and served cold or at room temperature with a dipping sauce of sand ginger powder, salt, and rendered chicken fat mixed into a rough paste. Sand ginger is not the same as regular ginger. It is drier, more floral, and faintly medicinal. It smells like a very old and very good pharmacy. In the Chinatown restaurants of Los Angeles and San Francisco, in the 1960s and the 1970s, sand ginger chicken appeared as a cold appetizer before the meal or as a late-night dish after the restaurants closed and the staff ate together. It cost almost nothing because the chicken fat came free from the cooking of other dishes, and sand ginger powder cost pennies at any dried goods shop. This dish is nearly extinct in Chinese-American home cooking. The ingredient itself is the barrier. Most people have never heard of sand ginger. Their grandmothers kept it in an unlabeled jar next to the stove and knew it by touch. Number 5. Steamed pork patty with water chestnuts. Mati Jing Ru Bing. Ground pork mixed with finely chopped freshwater chestnuts, a little ginger, soy sauce, cornstarch, and sesame oil pressed flat into a shallow dish and steamed for 20 minutes. The water chestnuts stayed crunchy inside the cooked pork, and every bite had that unexpected snap. In the 1950s, freshwater chestnuts came through Chinatown vegetable suppliers, and they were entirely different from the canned ones that ended up on every Chinese-American restaurant menu by the 1980s. Freshwater chestnuts were sweet, firm, and juicy. The canned ones were none of those things. When the freshwater chestnut supply became unreliable and canned became standard, this dish quietly stopped being worth making. That is the story of how convenience ruined a perfect meal. The dish did not change, the ingredient changed, and the ingredient was the soul of the whole thing. Number 4. Congee with fish slices. Yu Pianzhou. Fresh white fish was sliced thin across the grain and marinated for 10 minutes in ginger, white pepper, and a little sesame oil. The slices were dropped raw into a bowl of boiling congee at the table. They cooked in the porridge's heat in under 2 minutes. The fish was silky, the congee was creamy, and the ginger cut through both. In Cantonese families across Chinatown in the 1960s and 70s, this was the sick day meal. Your mother made it when you had a fever. She made it when your grandmother was too tired to want real food. She made it when someone in the family needed to be told without any words at all that they were cared for. That is a heavy weight for a bowl of rice porridge with fish to carry. It carried it every time. Number 3. Pork and preserved egg, congee. Pei Dan Shu Ru Zhou. Ground pork mixed with ginger and soy sauce is dropped into simmering congee in small pieces, alongside cubed century egg. That is the bowl. It is the most ordered congee in any Cantonese restaurant that serves it. It was the one eaten by Chinese railroad workers in the Sierra Nevada in the 1860s and 70s, when the only provisions they had were what they carried themselves: dried rice, preserved eggs, a little salt pork. They made congee over campfires at altitude, in temperatures that killed the workers who were less prepared. This bowl of rice porridge kept people alive through the building of this country's infrastructure. The men who built the Transcontinental Railroad were fed, in significant part, by this bowl. America has a monument to the Golden Spike. There is no monument to the congee pot. There should be. Number 2. Braised pork belly with hard-boiled eggs. Hongxiaoru with ludan. Thick slabs of pork belly braised for 2 hours in soy sauce, Shaoxing wine, rock sugar, star anise, and ginger, until the fat was trembling and the meat had turned the color of mahogany. The hard-boiled eggs went in halfway through and absorbed the sauce all the way to their centers. The eggs were the thing. The eggs soaked up 2 hours of that braising liquid and became something no grocery store egg could ever be on its own. In Chinatown households and in the staff meals of Chinese restaurants across America, from the 1940s onward, Hongxiaoru was the Sunday dish, the dish that took time, the dish that told the family the week was done and something good was happening in the kitchen. A slab of pork belly cost almost nothing. The time it took to braise it was the expensive ingredient. That time is what the dish was really made of. Number 1. Lap mei fan. Preserved meat rice, cooked in a clay pot. Chinese sausage, lap chung, the sweet fatty pork that smelled of rose wine and sugar as it cooked, was laid over raw rice. A piece of dried duck liver sausage and a strip of cured pork belly joined it. The pot was cooked with a measured amount of water until the rice absorbed everything, and the bottom layer turned into a golden crust you scraped up with a spoon, and it crackled. The fat from the sausage dripped down into the rice during cooking. The whole pot smelled like something a person could live on indefinitely, and several generations of Chinatown families very nearly did. In the 1950s and 60s in San Francisco, families in single-room occupancy hotels in Chinatown cooked this on a single hot plate. One clay pot, one burner, one room. The lap chung came from the sausage maker on Stockton Street. The dried duck liver sausage came from the same shop. The rice came from a 50-pound bag under the bed, because that was the most economical way to buy it, and economic precision was not optional. It was survival. This dish fed families through the hardest years of Chinatown history, through exclusion acts and internment fears, and decades of being told this neighborhood was temporary. These people were temporary. The clay pot said otherwise. The clay pot said, we are still cooking. We are still here. This kitchen is ours. Make one of these this week. Just one. Buy a block of firm tofu and a century egg and a bottle of sesame oil and make number 13. Buy Chinese sausage from an Asian grocery and a clay pot if you can find one, and make lap mei fan on a Sunday afternoon. Do not look at your phone while you do it. Buy the salted fish your grandmother would have recognized. Let the apartment smell like her kitchen for one evening. Because these meals were never just about being cheap. They were about being Chinese in a country that made that difficult, and cooking anyway. They were about a woman in a 3-room apartment on Sacramento Street feeding 6 people on a pot of rice and a piece of fish wrapped in newspaper and making it feel like abundance. Those are not just recipes, they are proof. Tell me in the comments which of these your family still makes. Tell me if your grandmother made lap mei fan in a clay pot. Tell me if anyone else has a memory of Tiao from a bakery that no longer exists, because that memory is the recipe, and the recipe deserves to survive.